Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call the meeting of the Board of Trustees for the Northeast Howard Regional Sewer District to order for September 7, 2023. Ask the Secretary, please call the roll.
Mayor DeGeeter, present. Mayor Baji.
Present.
Ms. Dumas.
Here.
Ms. Chambers.
Here.
Mayor Alai.
Here.
President Brown.
Here.
Mr. Sulik. Here.
Thank you. Now I ask for the approval of the minutes from our August 17, 2023 meeting.
So moved.
Motion by Mayor Baji,
Second.
second by Ms. Chambers. Is there a comment? And then the minutes will stand approved as they are printed. Thank you. Let's go to public session on a specific agenda topic. Ask the CEO if anybody signed up to speak.
They have not, Mr. President.
And then we will go to your report, please.
Thank you, President Brown, and members of the board. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You.
As you know, we had 2 days of severe weather on August 23rd and 24th. There were impacts on both the stormwater system and the sanitary and combined sewer systems. So I'd like to ask Frank Greenland and Frank Foley to provide an overview of the storm, the impact on the district and on our member communities, and our response. So I'll turn it over to Frank.
Okay, 2023's been a wet year. And the difference this year, last year was pretty wet too, but this year it's violent too. Wet and violent. We've had some really intense storms. So we'll cover the 23rd storm. This is our rainfall radar imagery. This is our service area in general. It extends beyond, but the yellow, the pinks are rainfall amounts in the 4+ inch range. Yellows, 3 to 4 inches. Even green, which is generally good, you're looking at a couple inches of rain in those areas. So it was a lot of rain across the entire service area.
Okay.
We can then take that rainfall total and put it into what we call design storm. You know, you hear about the 100-year storm, and there's different ways to depict these storms. This event generally was in the 25-year range in those orange and brownish tan areas. And those, of course, are the areas that were hit the hardest. So it's a pretty extreme event. Not a long rain event, but a lot of volume.
Okay.
Going back, this isn't the first one though. July 20th, we had a very severe event as well. So again, rainfall totals a little bit less, but on the same side of town. More of the central and west side, 1 to 3 inches of rain. When we look at the design storm totals, we see a little different picture. This storm was very intense in short periods of time, so we started to see things in those pink areas on the 200-year recurrence interval. Where the amount of rain.
I'm not familiar with that.
What's that?
As I said, I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you know, 15 minutes, or an inch and a half of rain over 15 minutes is a 200-year event. And that intensity causes destruction, causes flooding, and a whole host of other things. And so these storms were different, but both were severe.
All right, so criteria normally for design for systems, residential is 5 years?
10 years
10 years.
generally on a storm sewer system.
Okay,
That's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up. Most community storm sewer systems in the residential grid on the street are designed to carry a 10-year event.
okay. Commercial is what?
Commercial, you might come up to 25.
25, okay.
Highway systems, generally 50. Now, it can vary, because as we see higher storm events, communities are starting to think about, well, what should I size it? But the Northeast Ohio grid is typically 10 years, and that is not different than a national trend. So that's tough. When you get a 200-year storm on a 10-year grid, you're going to have problems.
Okay.
In terms of community outreach, our watershed team leaders, we're always reaching out to communities. First, we're trying to address our trouble spots before the storm, clear trash racks, things like that. But we reach out to the communities to understand what's going on across the service area. We got a lot of reports of flooding, both basement flooding and road flooding in these events. A lot of the stuff on the 23rd concentrated on the west side of our service area. So here's some of the photos. This is North Royalton. This is the Parma-Cleveland border. This appears to be Brook Park Road to me. A lot of flooding in this area. at 130th and Longmead, the underpass, underwater. The zoo had significant flooding, had to close events because of high water within the zoo. So in terms of our post-storm response, you know, in some areas, things worked. I mean, it's amazing. We did a project here at Pepper Pike. It's designed for a 25-year storm. This new basin and culvert system, you can see the debris line where the basketball is. So the basin filled but receded as it was supposed to, and there was no real reported flooding in this area. So that's good news. This is Carouge. Carouge filled up like it's supposed to. It's a dry detention and fills up during rainfall events to mitigate flooding. So you can see debris up on the grass. You can see debris at the inlet control structure. This is typical of what we see in severe storms. A lot of timber gets tossed around. So inlets and outlets can get clogged, culverts, bridges, and the like. So we employ our service contractors to get out there and clean this as soon as possible. Bigger systems. This is the trash rack at Fairhill on Doan Brook that was recently installed. This trash rack is designed to take big timber and keep it from going into the culvert at University Circle, so it actually is working. Our job is to clean this thing up as soon as possible. So I just want to give you some perspective on the statistics on the stormwater side between these two events. The July 20th storm, actually, we cleared a significantly increased quantity of debris as compared to August 23rd. And maybe the system cleansed itself after a period of relatively mild weather. But the $100,000 line item for a one-day cleanup is kind of on the high side for the stormwater contracts. We've only had two over 200,000. These contracts are about 1.3 million for 2+ years, so that's kind of a big event. We saw less debris and sediment on the second event, but still, an appreciable total for our stormwater side of things.
Man, it was only 30 days between events, so.
Right, and it really depends. You know, the August 23rd storm was actually August 23rd and 4th. On 24th, it was wind that caused some big problems. So we'll see what happens as we get the next event. That wind, I'm sure, dropped timber on the floor, and it's going to get picked up someday.
Well, wait, you don't have to talk it up.
So I'm going to turn it over to Frank Foley to talk about the other side of the house.
Okay, thanks, Frank. Good afternoon, President Brown, members of the board. Frank talked about flows in general and rainfall. I just want to show briefly the amount of flow that we had coming in at the head of each of our plants. So the second column there shows the peak capacity at each of our plants. The third column shows the peak flow that we experienced on the 8/23 storm. So at the front door of Easterly, 1.6 billion gallons, southerly 800 million, and then at Westerly 120 million, all exceeding the capacity of the plant. Now, at southerly and easterly, we have relief, either through overflows or bypasses at those plants. Westerly, what we don't show there is the amount of flow that went around the plant through the northwest interceptor to Sistoff, and I'll get into that a little bit further in. Okay, John. So three major impacts from this storm on the collection system in the plant. We had an overflow at Edgewater, the third one for the season. We had surcharging in the northwest interceptor between Edgewater and the Westerly plant, and then we had flow that entered the CEHRT construction site at Westerly, which wasn't supposed to be there. So this slide shows a summary of the three overflows. Frank mentioned the July 20th event. That was a pretty big one. We had 212,000 gallons of overflow at Edgewater. In my quarterly update, I mentioned, I believe the 7/29 event was essentially a kind of a burp in the system based on some our bubbler. The event on 8/23 was 2.7 million gallons of flow at Edgewater, which was, 10, 12 times what we saw on the 20th, so a lot of flow there. Okay, John. Along the northwest interceptor, which is, it's a wet weather pipe. We don't have flow in there typically during dry weather. 3 manhole failures between Edgewater Park and the plant where manhole covers, which are bolted down, blew off. And then we had wastewater coming up through the interceptor, through the surface of the road on Whiskey Island Drive at the entrance to Westerly. Okay. This map just kind of shows the general area where we experienced all the issues. So on the left is where the CSO, that 069 or the Edgewater outfall is located. The failed manhole covers along the northwest interceptor there, and then Whiskey Island Drive right at the entrance to the plant. A couple photos and this is from the first event in the afternoon of the 23rd. The one on the left is Edgewater, right near, there's a roundabout where you can either go into the park or you can head down Whiskey Island Drive to Westerly and beyond. And then on the one on the right shows the marina there where, in both of those cases, surcharging and failed manhole covers. Okay, John. This shot, it's a little hard to see because it's dark, but this is the entrance to Westerly, right at the Whiskey Island Drive. And near that orange barrel there to the right, you can see some water bubbling up, and then also above that, kind of in the center of the road, water bubbling up. That's actually wastewater coming through the interceptor up through the road. And this was taken about 8:45 on the 23rd. Okay. This diagram shows the SISTOF facility and then where we're constructing the CHRT facility to the right. The green arrows show where wet weather flow typically would go around the construction area through the excess flow conduit that was constructed. Now, this conduit can take approximately 800 or 900 million gallons a day of flow. The red, let me back up, I'm sorry. There are 2 bulkheads in purple. They're identified there, one at the upstream end and then one at the downstream end. The upstream bulkhead is to prevent flow from getting into SISTOF and the construction area now during construction. The downstream bulkhead is also to prevent flow from getting into the construction area, but it also prevents lake flow from backing up into there. I'm going to have John step through these, it's kind of the same thing on photographs. So the yellow blocks are the approximate locations of the bulkhead. This is how the flow pattern would be normally during wet weather. On the left is the SISTOF, the old SISTOF, and then to the right is the construction area. The first thing that happened was that upstream bulkhead failed. There's a red X on there. Go ahead, John. After that, flow entered the SISTOF facility and then made its way into the excavation. The flow accumulated within that excavation area, and as pressure built up, then the second bulkhead failed. That went away. Go ahead, John. And then flow was able to be relieved out of the construction area. So that's just quickly, how flow made its way into and then out of that construction area. So our response, as usual, our SSMO guys did a great job cleaning up the beach near the CSO outfall. They performed some cleanup around the manhole that I showed in the marina area. We also had help from Metro Parks staff who cleaned up debris around manholes in the park area. In addition to that, we had posted some signs. I believe this was a WQIS staff, but we posted signs near those manholes in the park where we had surcharging, similar to the signs that we put on the beach when there's been an overflow event, just as warnings. And then the SSMO folks resecured the manhole covers. Robin Halpern and the Regulatory Compliance Group, of course, contacted Ohio EPA, toured the site on Friday, the 25th, with folks from the Northeast District Office. And then engineering and construction staff and their contractors assessed any potential damage to the interceptor and the road at the plant entrance, made repairs to that. And then we have a couple actions that still need to be completed. So engineering construction, along with the contractors, next week are going to be inspecting the remainder of the interceptor from the plant up towards Edgewater Park. And then those bulkheads that failed at the construction site will be reinstalled, and that's planned for Friday. And that's,
So in terms of maybe an acceleration in the amount of debris that may have showed up on beaches or near shore areas, are there anything on that or anything with respect to fecal chloroform counts? Different than normal.
I don't know. I don't have any information on that. I know that following an Edgewater event, we have a standard protocol where we go out, we sample the beach, we continue to sample the beach until the numbers are down, and then we take the signs down after that, so.
But we were out there, and you'll see an immediate spike, and sometimes that immediate spike goes the other way quickly. Sometimes it lingers. It's all about wind and current direction.
Okay.
But we're on it. We sample it for 72 hours, I believe, or until the levels rise below the safe standard. And we're still well connected with, beach notification systems for the public.
And President Brown, we do issue a press release whenever we have an overflow at Edgewater.
Okay.
Thank you, Frank. And Frank, President Brown, we just wanted to provide that overview, obviously, because it was 2 days of very severe events, and then we obviously had these issues at Westerly while we were in the midst of a very large construction.
Well, the thing that always kind of resonates with me is this an anomaly or is this a new norm? So that's to be determined.
I vote for the new norm for, I mean, the annual totals have risen. I've been here a long time, and they've come up several inches since, when I got here. The nature of the violent storms, and we've had violent storms in the past too, but we've had some real doozies lately. So for the time being, this is what we're going to see and should expect.
The other point that I wanted to add on the stormwater side, Frank showed the picture from Pepper Pike of that basin working, the project working. So we did hear reports of things working, which were also very satisfying to hear that. We had good feedback from Maple Heights, for example, about them experiencing much less basement flooding than they had in the past. I don't know, Frank, if you want to say anything.
So in some areas, we've made some increases in that level of service, and they survived, right? Had a bad storm, but they survived. Yeah. In other areas, we've done master planning. We told you 1.4 billion in stormwater need. These types of storms create new problems, and they have created new problems that we're investigating across the
I saw a lot of news about public meetings regarding basement flooding in a number of communities. So,
right.
And to the extent that people have access to or use our data to inform improvements that they need to make in their system so that they can have capacity to get to our system is something that I think we need to continue to pay close attention to, because I think there's going to be more and more of those discussions.
I agree, and I will say one thing, the stormwater program and its, our revenue to do things regionally and local cost share revenue has made a difference. But, this is a sustained war, right? It's got to continue. The Member Community Infrastructure Program, that $15 million a year program, there's been success. There has been success, and so investment needs to continue. The rains aren't going to stop, but the infrastructure continues to age.
Yeah, and that's the point I'm trying to make, that as we agree, the frequency and the intensities are beginning to far exceed, from a planning perspective, what people planned for 25, 30 years ago. Most of these systems are 50 years old plus. And so our ability, again, to share information with them as to some of the challenges with their capacities would be helpful. You know, you and I have been around here long enough to know that, you know, folks have lived with basement flooding 30, 40 years. You finally do a project, bring them relief, and then here comes a different pattern. So I think that's something that we need to really take some initiative on to do that level of outreach so that we're being proactive as opposed to waiting till people finally figure it out that, oh, there's a problem, we need to do something here locally.
So the game's never over, right?
That's
So we
correct.
have increased levels of service in a lot of areas through past district projects and more recent efforts, and it's just got to continue.
Yeah, well, I would hate to see what would have happened in the Collinwood area had we not.
That's right.
Easterly,
That's right.
you know, so.
So President Brown, the only other thing that I wanted to mention is that my 2024 goals and priorities are in your packet. As in previous years, these incorporate our strategic plan and our diversity, equity, and inclusion and sustainability plans. So my focus continues to be on ensuring that the district is an employer of choice at all levels, helping our member communities access federal infrastructure funding, so important to the conversation that we were just having, running an efficient and effective utility for long-term rate control, and obviously recruiting and retaining our leaders through succession planning. So I'm happy to take any questions on those goals or priorities, and that is our report.
Questions, comments? No question. All right, thank you very much. Let's go to our action items. Start with let's start with authorization to advertise, beginning with request for authorization, publish notice calling for bids in accordance with Ohio Revised Code, Section 6119.10, for a 2-year requirement contract for uniforms and equipment for district security officers with an anticipated expenditure of $100,000. Request for authorization to publish notice calling for bids in accordance with Ohio Revised Code, Section 6119.10 for the renewable energy facility ash slurry and induced draft fan variable frequency drives replacement project with an anticipated expenditure of $120,000. And then finally, request for authorization to publish notice calling for bids in accordance with Ohio Revised Code Section 6119.10 for the Euclid Creek Tunnel Shaft 1 grit removal project with an anticipated expenditure of $200,000.
Move for adoptions of resolutions 230 through 23223.
Motion by Mayor Eli. Second by Ms. Chambers. Question, just if you could briefly, 23223, we've seen this before. It was out for bid previously. Something happened that we and the prospective winner of the bid agreed we shouldn't move forward on. So we are back here again. What's different?
Yes, that's correct, President Brown. So the first time around, we did not like the plan that the contractor had for dewatering the grit. So they wanted to put it on the ground, close to a wetland. We didn't think that made sense. They wanted to charge us more to do it differently. We looked at the specifications. We didn't think we were clear on those specifications, so we decided to cancel the contract, update the specifications, and then rebid.
Okay, makes sense to me. Any other question? If not, without objection, they're approved.
Resolutions 230 through 232-23.
Thank you. Let's go authorization to issue request for proposal, starting with request for authorization to issue an RFP in accordance with Ohio Revised Code Chapter 153 for pre-designed services for Minnie Creek near Bagley Road Flood Reduction Project. Request for authorization to issue an RFP in accordance with Ohio Revised Code Chapter 6119 for gauge adjusted radar rainfall data and supporting services. Request for authorization to issue an RFP in accordance with Ohio Revised Code Chapter 6119 to retain a suite of coaches for leadership coaching services. Also request for authorization to issue an RFP in accordance with Ohio Revised Code Chapter 6119 for a comprehensive assessment of the district's diversity, equity, and inclusion program. And then finally, a request for authorization to issue an RFP in accordance with Ohio Revised Code, Chapter 6119, for the electronic bidding solution evaluation and implementation project.
Move to adopt 233 through 23723.
Motion by Mr. Sulik,
Second.
second by Ms. Chambers. Questions? All right. Let's start with 23523. This is, looks like a program that we had entered into contracts with before, and I think we've extended it a couple of times. Now it looks like we're going out for a new opportunity for service providers and service. Kind of explain what we're getting for this and how does this help support any of the things that we're doing in terms of staff development, et cetera, session planning.
Certainly. Good afternoon, President Brown and members of the board. You summarized it very well. That's exactly what we have been doing since 2018. We have contracted with these suite of coaches that are listed in the resolution. We've been very pleased with the work that they've done. They've worked with senior leaders, managers, developing key developmental areas, but also developing the areas in which they are very good at and helping them to even be better. So we feel as though this process has strengthened our staff, made them more productive and efficient, and we want to continue this. But because we have used the same suite of coaches, we would like to open it up. There are other organizations that do this work and provide opportunities for some other folks in our community to actually provide this service for us.
Okay. Good, thank you. Let's go to 3623. District's DE&I program. So I guess there's some comments in terms of where we are with respect to the program itself. And I would ask our Board of Trustees to listen attentively because this is one of those things across the country that has become kind of a hot button. I don't know why, but it is. But we are certainly dedicated to diversity, equity, inclusion here at NEORSD. So let's hear about what we've been up to and where we're going.
The assessment that we are hoping to employ here at the district, we've done this before. We've at least 3 times since I've been here, we've done assessments. It's given us an opportunity to find out what our employees feel about the DEI program. Is it being effective? Are we meeting our goals? So we're hopeful that we will be able to do that again. We think we are doing a great job, but we're going to find out if we are really doing a great job. And so Lydia is here. Lydia Stump-Hartman is our DEI specialist, and she's just going to let you know a little bit about what we've been doing this year in the DEI realm.
It's fine.
Thank you. Good afternoon, President Brown, members of the board. As Constance mentioned, before you today, we have a resolution request to issue an RFP to conduct a DEI assessment. After 3 years of more robust programming and strategy, as Constance mentioned, we want to ensure that we are being as impactful and effective as we can be. So this DEI assessment, we hope, will enable us to do that. We thought it would be a good time in conjunction with this request to take the opportunity to give you a mid-year update and showcase some of the elements that we hope will be evaluated under the DEI assessment. As I begin, I want to start with our purpose statement for the DEI program. So our DEI program exists to ensure that we are an employer and business partner of choice, where people of all identities and experiences are understood, appreciated, and fully included in creating a culture of performance excellence. We leverage the power of diversity to produce results that support the organization's mission, vision, and core values. I'll start with some quantitative data to showcase the impacts that we've been able to achieve so far in 2023. Our employee resource groups have hosted 12 district-wide ERG events with 433 engagements with those events. We've hosted 2 racial justice dialogues on Indigenous issues in society. We have 5 DEI subcommittees operating to provide feedback and input on how we advance and further our DEI work. We've conducted 7 different topics of DEI trainings with 90 employees attending these trainings, and 100% of our departments have continued to have annual DEI goals, and they are well on their way to completing 119 tactics in 2023. Our DEI program is guided by 5 action goals, so I'd like to go through each action goal and highlight one initiative that we've been able to accomplish in 2023. You'll see additional text on your slides of other things that we have accomplished, but for the sake of time, I will just highlight one for you today. So under Recruit, Engage, and Retain a Diverse Workforce, we piloted our Clean Water Fellowship in 2022, which is a 2-year rotational program targeted for recent graduates who identify as socially and economically disadvantaged. They rotate through our 4 more technical departments, being O&M, TSG, Technical Services Group, Engineering and Construction, and Watersheds. Our first Clean Water Fellow that we hired last year did get promoted into a wastewater plant operator in training role in July. And we also hired 2 new Clean Water Fellows that just started last month. Additionally, we hope to repost the job requisition this fall in advance of December graduates to bring on 1 additional Clean Water Fellow for a cohort of 3. Our second action goal is to work together in ways that incorporate employee skills, creativity, perspective, and talents. I'd like to highlight that we piloted an inclusive leadership workshop series with operations and maintenance frontline leaders in 2023. This is a 3-part workshop series that focuses on equipping employees to understand their role in creating an inclusive culture. Under Learn and Apply DEI Principles to District Business Practices, I want to highlight the development of a DEI toolkit. This is a project that's been in the development phase for about 1.5 years and is very close to the finish line. This will basically be a self-service library of resources to help employees operationalize DEI into their day-to-day work. So there are articles, podcasts, videos, all of the different media vetted internally to help aid our employees and meet them where they are at on their journey to understanding and embedding DEI. Our 4th goal is to eliminate barriers to participation facing our employees, customers, and vendors. So I'd like to mention the continuation of our utility assistance resource fairs. We recently hosted one on August 26th in the southeast side of Cleveland. And so far, cumulatively in 2023, we have served over 1,000 families through our resource fairs. We are looking forward to one more in this year and supporting our residents in enrolling in utility assistance programs. And lastly, we have a goal to engage business and community partnerships that promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. Over the last 2 years, we have become involved in Pride in the CLE, and we have had increased involvement from staff in this past year, and this has really served 2 functions that I'm seeing. When we are out in the community at different Pride events, we are really receiving a lot of feedback from customers that they are so excited and thrilled to see their sewer district promoting these issues and being there for the LGBTQ+ community. And secondly, it has really been a wonderful activation point for our newly founded LGBTQ+ ERG, really aiding in creating momentum and engagement for our employee resource group. So as we look ahead to the end of the year, I want to highlight a few things that we are looking forward to. Our Disability Inclusion Subcommittee is finalizing some recommendations to ensure that we are an employer and partner of choice for the disability community. We will be launching an ERG application that will help us to track and analyze ERG data better. We are hosting a racial justice dialogue on immigration in partnership with Global Cleveland. And upon your consideration of this resolution request, we hope to launch the work of the DEI assessment this year, wrapping up in the first part of 2024. That's what I have for you today for my mid-year update. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions?
No, not very good.
Very well done, thank you. All right, and then 23723, just curious. Guess I'll just ask it, why do we need this? I mean, this is a procurement process, and so I'm always concerned about making sure that the playing field, this level, as we're in the procurement, otherwise we hear about it in one form or another. So minimum falls, lowest and best, whatever our criteria is, and then the ability to evaluate them all equitably. We're gonna invoke software to do this, that's what I'm hearing?
Mohan can start the answer to that question.
Good afternoon, President Brown, members of the board. So the purpose of this is that the current bidding process is a very labor-intensive process in which bidders have to supply various documentation. It's collected and collated manually, it's reviewed. We want to improve that by putting a centralized process in. We hope it'll benefit the bidders by letting them know if their bids are incomplete or missing something right at the time they're submitting, rather than waiting until we're evaluating them. It's important to note that this should offload a lot of the collation and review and work by the staff. However, this is still going to be human decisions. The same people who make the decisions on the bids will continue to make them. And we will be sure to make sure that smaller firms with less resources, this will not present an impediment to participating in the bidding process.
Must have been reading my mind. Glad we're gonna do that. All right, other questions or concerns? Okay, if there are none, then without objection, they are approved.
Resolutions 233 through 237-20.
All right, let's go authorization of purchase. This is authorization of $567,000 to purchase 54 Gorgon polymer composite media modules for the renewable energy facility Mercury Scrubbers from sole source vendor EnviroCare International.
Move to adopt 238-23.
Motion by Ms. Stewart.
Second.
Second by, the name? Mayor Bocci. Mayor, Mr. Mayor Bocci. So, all right, questions, concerns? If there are none, then without objection, it's approved.
Resolution number 238-23.
Thank you. Let's go authorization to enter into agreement. We're going to take 239-23 separately. We'll do that first. So that's for a request for authorization to enter into a reimbursement agreement with the City of Rockview Heights for reimbursement of district construction an amount not to exceed $1,500,000 for local stormwater system improvements and testing and construction inspection services performed under the district's Chippewa Creek flood reduction near Echo Lane project.
Move to adopt 239-23.
Motion by Mr. Sulik.
Second.
Second by Ms. Dumas. Is there a question? No question. I'm going to ask for a roll call, please.
Mayor Bocci.
Yes.
Ms. Dumas.
Yes.
Ms. Chambers.
Yes.
Mayor Lai.
Abstain.
President Brown.
Yes.
Mr. Sulik.
Yes.
Mayor DeGuiar, yes. Passes.
Thank you. All right, let's continue. Also have a request for authorization to enter into a project agreement with West Creek Conservancy to provide local match funding to stabilize the segment of Mill Creek within the regional stormwater system under the WCC's Mill Creek at Northfield Road Spring Restoration Project with a district contribution toward the project cost an amount not to exceed $160,000 and $241,000 from Ohio EPA Section 319 grant program for a total project cost not to exceed $401,000. Request for authorization to enter into a professional service agreement with Wade Trim Inc. for the advanced stormwater planning of Big Creek West Branch problem areas WB-BP-01 to 03 project and amount not to exceed $1,205,408. And then also a request for authorization to enter into a professional service agreement with Application Software Technology LLC for the in-house cost savings management program project, an amount not to exceed $263,391.70.
Move to adopt resolutions 240 through 242-23.
Motion by Ms. Chambers,
Second.
second by Mayor Elias. Is there a question? A question without objection to approve.
Resolutions 240 through 24223.
Thank you. Let's go authorization to enter into contract. All right, starting with request for authorization to enter into 24-month requirement contracts for boiler preventive maintenance and repair services at all district facilities of sole source vendors, Energy Control, Inc., and Boiler Specialists, Inc., and with Johnson Controls, Inc., under the State of Ohio's Cooperative Purchasing Program as presented, in a total amount not to exceed $719,796 for all three agreements combined. Also request for authorization to enter into a construction contract with Ship Construction Company for the Southerly Second Stage Aeration Improvements Project in an amount not to exceed $38,234,400.01. Interesting.
Move to adopt 243 and 24423.
Motion by Mr. Sulik.
Second.
Second by Ms. Dumas. So let's talk about, huh?
And the penny.
The penny?
Not the penny, yeah.
That's one thing I'm not prepared to talk about.
I think they're getting us to focus on the penny.
It's a distraction. Okay, so, big project at Southerly. Interested in any capacity impacts as this project goes underway? Does it take the plant down? Does it require staging? What is it going to require us to do so that we don't end up having, I'll say, capacity issues, especially in light of what we just went through? Be a little concerned about that. So what say you?
Yep. Good afternoon, President Brown, members of the board.
Good afternoon.
Yes, this is a big rehab project at the Southerly plant, specifically to the second stage aeration infrastructure and all the equipment that comprises that process. So that includes the structural rehabilitation of all 10 concrete aeration tanks. A lot of the equipment, the diffusers themselves are going to be replaced. We have the actuators going to be replaced, valves, pumps throughout the system. We're also going to be rehabbing the aeration piping associated with the process, as well as the large air compressors and channel blowers. To your point, obviously there is going to be an impact to the capacity of the plant during construction, because we do have to take the tanks out of service during construction. So from the notice to proceed until substantial completion, that covers a 38-month period. During those 38 months, at least one tank will be out of service, decreasing the capacity of the plant from 480 MGD. It'll be reduced by 48 MGD. So yes, there is an impact there to the overall capacity. However, the primary capacity of the plant is greater than the secondary capacity of the plant. So any flows that exceed the secondary capacity go out the primary effluent bypass. The primary capacity of the plant is 735 MGD. So again, we're just going to see a small reduction in the overall capacity for the majority of the project.
Okay.
We do have about 70 days during that 38-month period. The max duration is 28 days. Of those 70s, we'll actually be reducing the secondary capacity by 50%. So again, flows that exceed that now reduced capacity of about 230 MGD will be sent out the primary effluent bypass. Again, we have to coordinate all this stuff with the EPA, which is typical during our construction projects, that we let them know that this is going to be happening, so that we're, not of doing anything in regards to our MPDS permit.
So timing and schedule matter?
Always, right? We want to finish these projects on time. So, in regards to money, as well as the environmental impact that the projects have when they're in construction.
All right. Okay. I'll take that. If there are no other questions, then without objection, those are approved.
Resolutions 243 and 244-23.
Let's go authorization of contract modification. Beginning with a request for authorizing final adjusting change order for contract number 220-00134 with Akron Building and Outdoor Maintenance, Inc., doing business as River Reach Construction for the Baldwin Creek Stabilization to Abbey Road project to decrease the contract amount by $85,490.82, thereby bringing the total contract amount to $677,999.59. Also requests authorizing final adjustment change order contract number 220-08509 with Mars Construction, Inc. for the Dome Brook Stream stabilization at Shaker Heights Country Club project to decrease the contract amount by $25,904.67, thereby bringing the total contract amount to $302,905.33.
Move 245, 246, 23.
Motion by Mayor Bocci,
Second?
second by Ms. Chambers. Is there question?
Never on a decrease.
Right.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. No question, then without objection, they're approved.
Resolutions 245 and 246-23.
Thank you. Property-related transaction. Only got one, yeah. This is a request for authorization to acquire two parcels in fee simple known as permanent parcel number 02014-140 and 02014-141, located at 12028 Carrington Avenue in City, Cleveland, owned by Huda M. Almobiet, trustee of the Almobiet Family Trust, necessary for construction and maintenance of the Big Creek West Branch Problem Area 9 project to enter into an assignment of assumption agreement with Western Reserve Land Conservancy and to allow for the entirety of the payment to be dispersed to Ohio Title Agency, LLC, with total consideration of $100,000 plus closing costs.
Move for adoption of resolution 24723.
Motion by Mayor Eli,
Second.
second by Ms. Dumas. Is there a question? No question, then without objection, it's approved.
Resolution 247-23.
Thank you. Let's go authorization to grant credit. This is authorizing the district to issue a credit adjustment amount of $40,968.64 against sewer charges on account ending 0004 to 13 Associates LLC at 11214 Snow Road, Farmer.
I'll make that motion, Mr. President.
Motion by Mayor Bocci,
Second.
second by Mr. Sulik. Is there a question? There's no question. Without objection, it's approved.
Resolution 248-23.
Thank you. And then finally, let's go authorization to implement. This is request for authorization to implement the 2024 Watershed Partner Service Agreement Program through the issuance of a request for proposals and a total not to exceed $440,000.
Move to adopt 249-23.
Motion by Mr. Sulik,
Second.
second by Mayor Eli. Questions? No question, and without objection, it's approved.
Resolution 249-23.
Thank you. That does take care of our action items. Information items. We have one that is the overview of the proposed bylaw revisions. This is the matter that was taken up by our governance committee. Our general counsel here is going to give us an overview of what was finally agreed upon in terms of language for any requested modifications. A brief review.
Good afternoon, President Brown and members of the board.
Good
I
afternoon.
want to cover all the proposed changes at a level that gives you comfort, of course, but certainly being brief. As a reminder, the Governance Committee, which was President Brown, Mayors DeGeeter, and Mayor Bocci, met on August 29th to consider the amendments. The packet has a That's a bad start. So your packet has a red line copy of the proposed changes if you want to refer to the actual language as we go through these in order. To simplify, I've broken these down into two broad categories, the technical clarifications and then Article 14 of the bylaws, procurement changes that follow the changes to the Ohio Revised Code.
Okay.
So starting with the technical clarifications. First, we propose increasing the stipend for the two independent members of the audit committee from $100 to $400 per meeting. This amount hasn't changed since the $100 was established many years ago, and we think this value better reflects their contribution to the district. The next change is that the current bylaws allow the public to request notice of public meetings on a specified topic, which we happily do. But the current language states that a fee is to be paid to the district for that notice. We just propose eliminating that fee. So next, we want to better define the CEO's existing authority over human resources matters. We specifically call out that human resources decisions may include but are not limited to decisions, as you see here, on the terms and conditions of employment with respect to compensation, paid time off, reimbursable relocation payments, immigration and processing and related fees, and other types of benefit and equity adjustments. This is mostly in response to some situations that we've seen elsewhere in other governmental entities where there was actually criminal charges brought against decision makers, where there was debate over whether there was explicit authority to do these sorts of things. So this is an explicit clarification of the existing CEO's authority. We're not expanding anything, but we think the clarity will be helpful. Moving on, we have two minor technical clarifications. Current language.
Just for the sake of for the record, there were 4 exceptions to that general provision. Those are the ones whose appointments are affirmed by the Board of Trustees.
That's correct. The language that is existing in the bylaws states that any sort of disciplinary actions that may come with relation to the chiefs that are listed in the bylaws would need to be reported to the board first. So that language is unchanged.
Thank you.
Sorry, I forgot to mention that. So these are just two minor technical clarifications. The current language requires the CLO to report all the settlement and release agreements to the board. They're not all called settlement and release, and so this is just a clarification that anything like that will be included in the report, which we already do. We also want to clarify that the CEO's compensation is determined through the contract.
Okay.
Those are all the technical clarifications. Any questions on those?
Questions?
No one was actually paying a fee for advertising a meeting to,
Not that I'm aware of.
okay.
We, as far as I know, while I've been here, we've never charged anybody, so. So moving on to the others, these are the two changes that were included in the recent state budget. The competitive bidding change in particular will cause a number of changes in our procurement processes, which are largely tied to the competitive bidding threshold. So the new threshold is now going to be $75,000 starting on October 3rd, and that limit will go through 2024. And then there's an annual automatic increase of 3% starting in 2025. So that automatic increase is a little bit different, and it causes us some changes in our bylaws and how we're going to handle that. The second change that you see there on the engineer's estimate, we'll talk more about that in a little bit.
Okay.
So turning to Article 14 and the procurement changes, we added a couple of definitions that you see here. The first is intended to add more oversight and transparency and hopefully clarify the intent of the bylaws. Currently, certain oversight requirements apply to construction contracts, and the word construction is used. This is such as the 10% limit on the contract's general allowance, and the requirement that there be a final adjusting change order. There's no definition of construction in the bylaws. It's used generally. And so we want to make those requirements applicable to public improvement contracts, which is a broader definition under Ohio law governing procurement. And that includes things like demolition, alteration, repair, and reconstruction. So it's going to be applying oversight to more agreements. And because the competitive bidding threshold will be adjusted annually starting in 2025, we created a defined competitive bidding threshold that we'll use throughout the many sections of the bylaws where we had that limit of 50,000 before. So we defined that competitive bidding threshold as the threshold under Ohio law that applies to the district at the time of the procurement action. And then that amount will be updated by the CFO annually in an appendix that we attach to the bylaws.
Does the CFO include his or her designate also?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Yeah. Anything else on this? Moving on. So here you see there's a number of sections where that new competitive threshold term will be inserted and replacing the current $50,000 limit. So this is setting when board approval is or is not needed for various procurements like competitive bidding, professional services, contract modifications. All of the current limits were 50,000, and that was all basically established to mirror the competitive bidding limit that was 50,000. Since it's going to be variable moving forward, that's why we're changing these sections to use the new term. That limit will increase annually, as I mentioned, starting in 2025. And then the next change comes about because of the other change to the state law. Currently, we cannot award a public improvement contract if the bid is more than 10% above the engineer's estimate. So that's Ohio law, and it's not currently addressed in our bylaws.
Okay.
The new state law ups that 10% to 20%. So on, say, a $300 million tunnel project, that additional 10% above the engineer's estimate can be quite significant. So our folks, when they saw this increase coming, wanted to have the ability to impose a stricter limit, something less than the 20% on certain contracts, typically the larger ones. So because we are looking for a limit at times that's going to be stricter than the state law, we want to add this topic to the bylaws. So this change that we're proposing would authorize the CEO to adopt a policy that permits that lower percentage on a contract-by-contract basis. And then the governance committee asked us to add the requirement that whenever we do go with a percentage that's less than 20%, we include that information in the resolution request that's authorizing the invitation to bid on the contract. So we did research that concept because we are deviating and being stricter than the revised code. We looked inside, talked to outside counsel, and we're comfortable with going stricter.
So in effect, we're actually describing what we would do as the public benefit of why we're taking that action.
Yes, correct. Okay. So next is a change that will impact our emergency contracting procedures. Currently, the emergency procedure thresholds begin at 25,000, so not the 50,000. So 25,000 to 75,000 is currently the kind of first process where the CEO informs the board after the procurement is made, and then the board ratifies that expenditure. And currently, anything over 75 would require prior approval from the president or vice president prior to the procurement, and then it's ratified. So we're proposing, because that 25 was not matching up with the 50,000 competitive bidding limit that we have the authority to go up to anyway. So we're proposing upping these two limits to 75,000 to 150,000 for the first process, and then over 150,000 for the second process. And I'll just note, this is the only one that we decided not to use that kind of escalating competitive bidding threshold that goes up 3% every year. We're just going to keep these static. And then these two changes here are tied to the new term public improvement contract rather than the existing construction terminology. The changes are intended to clarify the applicability of these provisions, and therefore it will result in actually more oversight. So the first one relates to the limit on general allowances above 10% unless the board approves a higher percentage. The second one is the requirement to have a final adjusting change order. We had a couple of those on the agenda today. Our amendments would have these controls applied to public improvement contracts, not just construction contracts. And so currently we have situations where there can be board-approved contracts that have general allowances over 10%, or we can have contracts that have change orders in them, but because they weren't considered construction, they weren't falling under these two oversights. And so we think, so those, that general allowance over 10% didn't happen on those contracts, and there wasn't a FACO required on those contracts. So making those apply to the public improvement contracts will actually bring more before you. Just one of those, I guess I wanted to give you one example. So when we're renovating maintenance and repair of an HVAC system, that would be considered a public improvement under Ohio law, but we might not have thought of that as construction. And so now that will come under these requirements. So then I saved the best one for last. These are property transactions. So as you know very well, all of the property transactions came to the board regardless of value, even the $1 easements. So we discussed this at length with the governance committee, and the recommendation is that real estate transactions that are less than the competitive bidding threshold can be approved by the CEO and the CLO and without board authorization. You're welcome. And we added also a requirement that those transactions that don't require board approval will be included in the CLO report semi-annually. And we actually already do that now. They're all in there, so that will continue to be the case. This slide shows what that would look like. So from January of 2020 to June 15th of this year, you can see there were 293 property-related resolutions. We had the proposed competitive bidding threshold limit in place. 242 of those would not have come before the board. So, yeah, so that'll have a big impact. So those are all of the changes that we have. The next steps are to address any concerns or questions the board might have coming out of today. And then September 17th, we would propose that the board adopts those amendments with an effective date of October 3rd of this year. So happy to take any questions if you have them.
Okay, I don't have a question. I just wanted to thank my two colleagues, Mayor Bocci, Mayor DeGeter, for participating and contributing to that process. I would note that as a committee, we did not only review, modify some of the language, but we also voted to approve them and the content that was recorded. And so, to your point, this information will come back before this body during one of our next board meetings, certainly before October the 3rd, so that it can be timely recorded, approved, and in place to meet the requirements of the state law. So Again, thank you to my colleagues. Thank you for the fine work that you did, and to the team that we met with for your input, getting us to this point. Thank you.
Yeah, I would thank you for your participation in the committee and helping us work through those. And a lot of folks in this room helped put all these together and think about them and come to the conclusion that we had. So thank all of them as well.
All right. That takes care of our information item. Lost mine somewhere. It's like that. All right. Let's see. Anything for open session? No? Anybody, Madam CEO, signed up to speak during the public